PFA fam, what is up? What is happening? We are back again. We are on to
We're
week
back.
4 waiver ads. This wasn't a crazy week. We did have some injuries this week, but nothing too major so far. So thankfully for that. But anyways, yeah, let's go ahead and get into the rank or the waiver wire pickups of the week. And we will start at the quarterback position. Now, the first couple of these might be rostered already in your leagues, but I thought they were rostered under 60%. So I went ahead and put them on here. One is Matthew Stafford. Obviously, they have not played yet. They play Monday night. But if he is sitting out there, he should be somebody you're looking to add. The upcoming schedule is excellent with matchups against the Colts, Eagles, and Cardinals coming up. And all three of these have struggled to stop opposing quarterbacks. So I do think this is a strong matchup. And then we could also be getting Cooper Kupp back in week 5 as well. So Matthew Stafford, I don't think it's just even somebody that I would be looking at maybe as a short-term ad, but also could be somebody as a long-term ad as well. And then Russell Wilson, I know it was really ugly today, getting 70 points hung on their head. But Russell Wilson really hasn't been the problem so far to start the season. And now they get the thing that cures all, and they get the Chicago Bears this week. But Russell Wilson is rostered in 50% of leagues on Yahoo. While the Broncos got absolutely torched by over 50 points today, it's hard to blame the offense. Russell completed 23 of 38 passes for 306 yards and a score. His pass catchers didn't help him out either. He had a touchdown wiped off the board by a penalty, and then Sutton also fumbled in a key moment as well. So, but if you are looking for something to get excited about, the Bears have the worst defense, or might be the worst defense in the league. I'm not sure. There's going to be a matchup of the terrible defenses between the Broncos and the Bears this Sunday. So I do think Russell Wilson is a great start this week. Next up, let's talk about CJ Stroud, rostered in 20% of leagues. He has now put up back-to-back 20-point fantasy performances, completing 20 of 30 passes for 280 yards and 2 touchdowns. Stroud has been impressive through his first 3 starts. While this isn't necessarily the best matchup against the Steelers, the volume has definitely been there and makes him a weekly QB2. And at worst, he might be a strong stash once bye weeks looming in week 5. So after that, we have Andy Dalton. I did not think we'd be talking about him, but with Bryce Young likely out for the next couple of weeks, Dalton was impressive today, completing 34 of 58 for 368 yards and 2 scores. You're good for 23.5 fantasy points. Next week, they will take on a Vikings defense who allow the 8th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, and will be a very tasty matchup for this Panthers offense. And then lastly, I did put Jimmy G on here. He did leave at the end of the first half, but we'll see if he returns. But if he does, he faces a Chargers defense that has been torched through the air. They allow the 2nd most fantasy points to quarterbacks. While I don't love Jimmy G, game script should dictate the Raiders having to throw the ball to keep up. So I do think Jimmy G is another option you could look at quarterback for next week.
Yeah, you have a bad team in Chicago whenever the Broncos they opened up as 2.5-point road favorites going into Chicago next week after getting 70 points hung on them. So that says all you need to know about that Bears team. But let's go ahead and move on to the week 4 waiver wire ads at running back. Obviously, you got to lead things off with Devon Achane, right? He had a ridiculous week whenever Raheem Mostert put up 4 touchdowns, and we're telling you that Devon Achane is going to be the number one running back ad this week. Just had an absolutely ridiculous game today, totaled over 230 yards, had 4 scores of his own. I know it could potentially get a little bit muddy with Jeff Wilson potentially coming back at some point, and then Savon Ahmed was ruled out today. But there's just no way the Dolphins can't keep Achane involved to some extent going forward after what he did today. Plus, we also have to remember that we're talking about Raheem Mostert, who's 31, Jeff Wilson's 27. Both those running backs have had their fair share of injury problems. So it's entirely possible that he ends up with a prominent role going forward just by one of the other guys missing time. And Savon Ahmed is a Jag, so I'm not really worried about him. So Achane is by far going to be the number 1 waiver ad this week. Kendre Miller, he didn't wow by any means today in his first action as a rookie, but I think he becomes the number 2 back, at least while Jamal Williams is on IR with that hamstring injury. Kendre Miller saw 21 snaps to Tony Jones 30, ran 10 routes to 17 for Tony Jones. And we also have to remember that Kendre Miller dealt with some injury issues during training camp, and then also he obviously missed the first 2 games of the season this year. So the fact that he came in, saw the amount of work that he did with having relatively little experience in that offense, I think is a good sign. And we also have to remember that last year whenever the Saints just threw Alvin Kamara into that, straight up workhorse role. He was by far less effective and efficient than we have seen him in the past couple of seasons. So I think Miller will see enough of a role to warrant flex consideration in 12-team leagues and deeper. So he should definitely be on the radar. Matt Breida had very little fantasy production. Obviously, that touchdown he scored not last week, on Thursday saved him if you did have to start him, but is in a much better spot in week 4, getting a matchup against the Seahawks, who going into week 3 had allowed the 7th most half PPR points per game to the position. Roshan Johnson moved him up into the ads this week. Khalil Herbert had the edge in snaps today in the blowout against the Chiefs, but Roshan saw one more opportunity. He had 49 total yards on 10 opportunities, while Herbert had 35 total yards on 9. He's not going to be a super sexy waiver addition because this offense is just absolutely dreadful right now. But if Roshan can take over a little bit more of this backfield, become the 1A, and if this can become more of like a 60-40, 65-35 type of split, he could become more viable. So I think he should at least be stashed on your bench, especially at the running back position where we know it can get ugly really quick. Tyjae Spears, I kind of went back and forth in terms of like, do I put him in the handcuff plus bucket? Do I put him in the ad here? I just bumped him up to the ad. Maybe I should have put like a little asterisk here or gave him his own little tier. He did see more opportunities and more snaps than Derrick Henry, but obviously that was dictated by the game script, right? But this is now a week out of 3 so far that we've seen where the Titans are willing to kind of just abandon the run and let Tyjae Spears kind of be that full-time back almost in that backfield when they are trailing, when they need more of a passing threat. So I do think he has some standalone value. If you pick him up, you kind of know that, like, hey, if the Titans are going to be trailing, this could be a Tyjae Spears type of game, and you can kind of throw him in your flex range. And then if anything were to happen to Derrick Henry, his value obviously takes off. So like I said, went back and forth between where to really put him, but I threw him up in the ads, especially for 12 teams and deeper. I think you can go out and stash him, but then you just kind of have to realize when you can and cannot put him in. Then just some other options here. Handcuff plus territory, Chuba Hubbard. He didn't see as much work today as he did in the previous 2 weeks, but we have seen him kind of have some standalone value, even with Miles Sanders getting the bulk of the carries. Zach Charbonnet had himself a pretty solid day. The thing with him too is that he's starting to overtake DJ Dallas in terms of the pass catching role. So if he can do that and remain the pass catching back over DJ Dallas and see more work than Kenneth Walker in that range, he can have some standalone value. Then obviously, if anything were to happen to Walker, Charbonnet becomes a very, very intriguing option in that offense. And then the handcuffs, Keontae Ingram, Tank Bigsby, Eli Mitchell, Rico Dowdle, I wrote Tank Bigsby twice. Don't have to add him twice. I just clearly messed it up. And then on the watch list, Sean Tucker, just to keep an eye. Rachaad White has not been playing well whatsoever. So he's just someone we need to keep an eye on as the season progresses to see if Tampa Bay starts to go away from him.
Yeah, I do think the Tyjae Spears situation is kind of interesting because I'll also say, Derrick Henry hasn't looked good at all this year. Like, it looks like possibly the age is starting to catch up to him. It doesn't help that their offensive line is dreadful there, that he never has, every time you look, it seems like he never has much of an opportunity either. But so I do think this is something we definitely should be monitoring. And if this is a team that falls out of it, you never know. This is a team that could end up trading away somebody like a Derrick Henry or something like that. Because he is a free agent after this year, maybe try to recoup something for him. So I do think Tyjae Spears is a really strong ad moving forward. But anyways, let's keep it moving here and let's jump over to the wide receivers and somebody I didn't expect to be on here again because I felt like he was going to get rostered in more leagues, and that's Tank Dell. Like, I really was pretty surprised that he's only rostered in 31% of Yahoo leagues and only 27% of ESPN leagues. Now, I do think in probably a lot of your competitive 12-team leagues, he's probably gone. But if he is sitting out there, there's no reason he should be available. He hauled in 5 passes on 7 targets for 145 yards and a score today. He has now seen 17 targets over the last 2 weeks. And if he's sitting out there, he's an absolute must add in all formats at this point because I don't think he's going away. This is going all the way back to the preseason where in training camp where he was getting a ton of buzz through that. And we also know that CJ Stroud actually was pounding the table for the Texans to draft him. As from what some of the reports out there were. So Tank Dell should definitely be rostered in more leagues. And then Jaden Reed is kind of in the same boat. I felt like after last week, having a pretty solid performance, that he would be rostered more, but only 21%. But I feel like Jaden Reed is probably rostered, again, very much like that, most competitive 12-man leagues, but he's certainly worth an ad. He didn't have a huge day today, 3 catches, 63 yards on 7 targets, but it could have been another wide receiver 2 performance had he held on to a would-be touchdown that got knocked out while he was going to the ground. So it could have been a much better day for Jaden Reed, but he also is somebody that I think once Christian Watson does return, it sounds like he's getting closer, both him and Aaron Jones sound like they have a better shot of possibly playing on Thursday night, but we'll see on that. But Jaden Reed certainly looks the part, very explosive player, and you can see the talent that he is there, and he is definitely better than Romeo Dobbs. So I think it's only a matter of time so he starts being more consistent. And then Adam Thielen, 47% rostered. He had a monster day today, hauling in 11 passes on 14 targets for 145 yards and a score. He has now seen 23 targets the last 2 weeks and is clearly the Panthers wide receiver 1 and should be in for another good day with the matchup against the Vikings. Very similar to the other 3 guys. I feel like these guys are probably rostered in a lot of leagues, but if he is sitting out there, Adam Thielen at this point should not be. So now, one of the injuries that we did deal with today was Mike Williams. He left the game with an apparent knee injury. It was reported after the game that he had to be carted to the team bus and could be looking at a torn ACL. Now, that is not confirmed. Well, we won't know until probably sometime Monday or Tuesday once he gets an MRI, but it definitely did not look good. He immediately went to the ground. It was really kind of a non-contact, even though there was a lot of guys in the area. Nobody really, he hadn't got hit yet with a point whenever he started his knee buckled. And so, I mean, it's possible maybe it's like a bone bruise or something like that, but it definitely looked like something that you would see from a torn ACL. So we will see on that. And if that is the case, I think the short-term ad here, I think it really elevates Josh Palmer, who did score a touchdown today on kind of a fluky, it was a tip ball that he caught and fell into the end zone with. But I think he'd probably be the guy. He's already running 68% of the routes as is. And so, you look at Mike Williams, who is receiving a 25% target share. I think that is going to be spread around. But I think maybe the biggest boost here is going to be Quentin Johnson, their first round pick. And so, considering he was only running 29% of the routes prior to this, I think at the very least, I think he easily steps into this Mike Williams type role, bigger body wide receiver. And so I do think Quentin Johnson, who's only rostered in 32% of leagues, is much more of a better long-term ad and now is a much more clearer path to targets. But I will say through the first 3 weeks that Quentin Johnson actually has a higher target per route run rate than what Josh Palmer did to this point. But Josh Palmer's only rostered in 2% of leagues. So he certainly should be added on an offense like this. It's going to be throwing the ball a ton. Next up, let's talk about Rashee Rice, 26% rostered. Came close to having a really solid day himself, about a half yard short of what it should have been a touchdown. He finished with 5 catches, 59 yards on 7 targets. Rice continues to grow within this offense and has looked like the best wide receiver on this team through the first 3 weeks. He does need to correct some drop issues that he continues to struggle with, but I think he's very well could end up being the wide receiver to own here for the Kansas City Chiefs. Now I get it; people are going to groan because we don't. The crazy part about this offense right now, outside of Travis Kelce, there's not a wide receiver that has a target share higher than 13% because they just spread the ball around so much. But Rashee Rice does look like he is the guy. He could end up being somebody, going further down the road once this thing starts getting a little bit more consolidated. I do think Rashee Rice would be that guy. Next up, Michael Gallup, 18% rostered. Welcome to relevancy, Michael Gallup, because through the first, he had by far his biggest day, hauling in 6 of 7 targets for 92 yards. Well, it's been hard to gauge because the previous 2 weeks, the Cowboys had absolutely murdered their opponents. However, this week, the Cardinals shocked the Cowboys, knocking them off 28-16. One thing to note with Gallup is he has been running 80% of the routes. So as long as the number holds, he should be a useful fantasy option, especially as bye weeks come, as somebody that we should be looking to roster and actually probably play as a flex option because the schedule is going to change and you're going to start seeing much more harder opponents than what they've seen over the first couple of weeks of the season anyways. Marvin Mims, 27% rostered. Mims has now scored double-digit fantasy points in back-to-back weeks with 3. Today he had hauled in 3 receptions on 5 targets, but he also for 73 yards and also returned a kick for a touchdown, 99-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. So he also had a good day. I think as long as he continues to produce, he very well could end up being a much more solid contributor. He is more of the deep threat option here within this offense. But I do think as this defense is going to continue to be as bad as they are, they're going to continue to have to throw the ball at a very high rate. So Marvin Mims should also be rostered. And lastly, let's talk about two more guys. Josh Downs, 3% rostered. Put together his best day of the season, 8 catches, 57 yards on 12 targets. While Michael Pittman is the unquestioned number one wide receiver within this offense, Downs has started to carve out a role in this offense. And it could be a decent wide receiver 4 or 5 in 12-man leagues if he can continue to see this kind of usage. He has now seen 24 targets through the first 3 weeks. And then lastly, Calvin Austin hauled in a 72-yard touchdown in the first half. He has close to 100 receiving yards and a score already in this game against the Las Vegas Raiders. So I do think Calvin Austin is also somebody you can kind of take a look at, especially with Deontay Johnson being on IR. And then 14 teams or more. You got guys like Jalen Hyatt, Trey Palmer, KJ Osborne, Jonathan Mingo, kind of these type of options that you can be looking to add. Now, I will mention Jonathan Mingo did leave with a concussion today. So that is also something we're going to have to monitor.
Yeah, I think I don't know what his ownership is on either site that we look at, but I think DJ Chark could make some sense in that situation if Mingo were to miss some time with that concussion. But let's go ahead and wrap it up with Week 4 tight end streaming options. Thankfully, Sam Laporta is not on this list anymore because he's finally rostered in more than 50% of leagues. So congratulations to everyone who has been listening to us pound the table for Sam Laporta. He came through in a big way today. But on to Week 4. Let's go ahead and talk about Juwan Johnson. Once Jameis Winston came into this game when Derek Carr went down, Juwan Johnson was just one of 3 players to be targeted. It was Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, and Juwan Johnson. I think Juwan Johnson had something like a 23% target share. Now, obviously, you don't want to try to extrapolate that, over such a small sample to the upcoming weeks. But I still think that Juwan Johnson is in an interesting spot here. They get Tampa Bay in Week 4. Tampa has struggled against tight ends for the past couple of seasons. So this could finally be a spot where Juwan Johnson is a tight end 1 for the week. Ferguson continues to play a key role for the Cowboys. He saw another 7 targets today that tied for the highest. There were 4 players that had 7 targets for Dallas, and then no one else had more than 3 on the team. That puts him up to 18 for the first 3 weeks. They get New England in Week 4, and then Luke Musgrave with getting Detroit in Week 4. Finally saw all the routes that he had been running. Finally saw them come into targets. He had 8 targets on the day, caught 6 of them, I think for about like 40 yards. He also, if Love could have placed it a little bit better, he would have had a massive play that likely would have resulted in a touchdown, but Jordan Love overthrew him in the middle of the field. So Musgrave will be another option in a matchup against Detroit, who is starting to get a little bit banged up on defense.
Let's jump over to a couple of these questions we have here. A-Chain let up it on my bench. So did everybody, right? Like, I know I think there were a couple people even on our live stream today, this morning. We kind of brought him up, but there was no indication that this was coming. I mean, the week prior, he had 1 carry and 1 target, right? So there was no way we were going to know that he was going to get 22 touches today, right? And so for people that have him, congratulations, because you already have the number 1 waiver ad. You don't have to worry about wasting anything on him. And so, but it does suck because I'll be obviously 50 points on your bench, but there was no indication it was coming. If you played him, it was just out of pure just luck that it happened, because there was nothing that said that this was going to happen. Because prior to this, Raheem Mostert had dominated the backfield touches to this point. So, and then same Chris, which Chargers receiver would you prefer? Like I said, I think short term, I think it's Joshua Palmer, just because we know his role. But I do think long term, Quentin Johnson is going to be the guy that benefits the most if this is a long term injury for Mike Williams, because he is very similar in terms of I think how they would look to utilize him. Obviously, very explosive athlete, big body wide receiver. Where Joshua Palmer is a little bit more of just he's kind of a guy. Like, he's not anything exciting, but I do think when we saw him last year, he was a useful fantasy asset. It wasn't somebody that you felt like you must need. It was like a must play, but he did have some weeks where he was able to contribute. So I think for the short term, I think it's Josh Palmer, but over the long term, I think it's going to be Quentin Johnson that's going to come and really win this. And then last, I got Mims too, but I'm hoping he gets more targets. Yeah, I mean,
it's crazy how few routes he's running.
I don't get it with all the other wide receivers that they're running out there, and it is like a ghost of past of the Saints, of like some of the, like Lil Jordan Humphreys and these guys that are running out there, the former Saints guys. Like I get it, those guys maybe know his offense a little bit better, but it doesn't make any sense. Like Marvin Mims is definitely better than all of those guys. That he should be running far more routes than what he is. It is frustrating, but with rookies, it tends to take some time. Most of these guys don't come right in and have immediate impact, and it takes time. Like, so I think for a lot of these rookies, you're going to continue to see them get more and more acclimated to the offense, more and more acclimated to the NFL, and where the coaching staffs are going to get a little bit more comfortable with using them long term. And so that's kind of where I think like a Marvin Mims and a Rashee Rice and a Quentin Johnson, like, don't drop these guys, because I think they are smart guys to hold. And as the season goes on, they're going to become more and more valuable as the season goes by. So same thing with Roshan Johnson. I get it. The Bears there's not a lot to be excited about with the Bears right now. But you have to figure at some point they're going to figure something out within this offense for this offense to look this bad. And so, like, Roshan Johnson's kind of in the same boat, where he is not somebody that I would look to fire up on a weekly basis. But as the season goes on, I think they are going to turn to him and see what they have in Roshan Johnson. So, yeah.
Yeah, Mims was banged up during training camp as well, so maybe that has something to do with him kind of being brought along a little slower. So
Yeah. All right, that is the last question we have here. So we'll go ahead and wrap this thing up. Hope everybody got them dubs this week. If not, be sure to tune in on Tuesday morning whenever our rankings drop for the week. And we'll also look to this week as well, as I will be posting a buy sell video. I think I'm going to try to have that out by Wednesday for everybody to get that out there, because I think there's a lot of players we can talk about, players we should looking to buy, and players we should looking to sell as well. So with that being said, be sure to gotta get the last one. Bitch, should I trade Geno for Stroud? I also have Tank Dell, 14 team, full PPR. I would. I think I would hold on.
I'd rather have Gino.
Yeah, I do think Stroud is super intriguing for what he's been able to accomplish right now.
Yeah.
But I just right now I still think Geno is a smarter option to have. You still have, I mean, not the within the weapons that are there and everything else. So I think I would lean that direction. Just game script today didn't really dictate for them to have to throw the ball a ton. And Kenneth Walker had a good day. I mean, DK Metcalf had himself a really good day, but overall, we'll see some more positive passing game scripts for Geno Smith. So, anyways, all right. So let's go ahead and get out of here. Be sure to have a good night. Have a good rest of the week, and we'll be back in early this week with our rankings and everything else. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button for future content. We will see you on the next one. Bye.